About 3 years ago, I came upon a video that showed one of the baddest looking cars I had ever seen, only to find out it wasn't even a production car. It was built from a kit using an Infinity. I decided at that time this was a car that I wanted to build. Here we are about 3 years later. Lots of progress has been made, but I'm ready to drive this thing. It's getting to be the end of the year in Texas. The nights are getting cooler. The moon is shining bright. We need to get this thing out on the road. Alright, what's up everybody? So here we are, it's October of 2024 and the Vaydor is still not done. No, it's okay. Like really, it's totally cool. You know, I think when I started this build, I hoped I could get it done within 1 year. And it became 2 years, now we're going on 2.5 years. But you know, it's cool that we got to do some paint in the last video. And still kind of continuing on with that. I got the roof wing done since the last time. You know, I've been doing a lot of interior work, so that's really what's going on now. Figuring out lots of things that I just had no idea about before. I had thrown these pieces in and said, oh my god, there's a million tasks that pretty much added up on my list that I could have, you know, kind of mentally noted that were going to need to be done. So I've been kind of checking those things off for the last couple weeks, and that's a lot of what I'm going to get into on this video. But when it all comes down to it, I know when the car is done, there's just certain things that I'm doing a certain way, and I'm going to be happy with the way those things have been done. Hey, it took longer, but you know what? I also got some pianos done in the process. I got parts of my house remodeled and a shed built. I mean, there were a lot of things in that 2.5 years that kind of held me up from working on the car, but it was necessary because life kind of goes on. So here we are, we're going to get into it. I'm going to cover a lot of cool stuff in this video. I'm going to try not to make it 2 hours long like some of these videos are, but if you know, building a car like this, there's just an unlimited amount of things that have to be done, and I'm trying to bring you guys as much of that as possible. So here we go, let's jump into it. Even though interior has been the main focus lately, I'm still trying to keep myself in the swing of the paint job and kind of keeping my mind fresh, knowing what needs to be done next. You know, maybe grab a piece here and there, kind of work on it as far as the exterior is concerned anyway. I thought it would be good to go ahead and get this roof wing done because that needs to go on. Now that I've got the back window in, I don't have to worry about trying to work on that if the wing were already installed. So I decided let's get that put on because the next thing that's going to really go in is going to be the headliner if I'm doing interior, and it would be nice to know that all that stuff is done, even though, you know, I did put some holes in the headliner that are going to be covered with plugs, so I'll still be able to remove the roof wing if it ever has to happen. But I figured, like, let's go ahead and try to close this part up. That way it's done, it's on the car, there's no reason why it shouldn't be. Now, at the same time, I'm still kind of working with like some of the trim pieces, you know. A lot of this stuff is really down to just the fine tuning. I've already done most of the hard work. It's just, you know, changing little things here and there, doing some final sanding, some priming, and getting these parts ready to go to where hopefully I can paint, you know, a whole bunch of pieces all at once. Now this roof wing still needed some sanding. It needed some pinholes and little divots and things like that filled in. So as I was sanding the first layer of the K36 primer, I realized that it was going to be worth it for me to do it one more time. I actually found some little low spots on top where if I had painted this thing black, you would have saw it would have looked like 2 hail dents or something. So I ended up putting a little bit of body filler up there and then getting a final coat of primer sprayed on this thing because I just felt like it was going to be so much more worth it. I mean, this piece is a focal point. It's going to be black. Everybody's going to see it. It's right there at pretty much just below eye level. So why not do an extra step, get an extra coat of primer on it, and do, you know, the necessary body work to really make it look good.
Okay, now in earlier parts of this build series, I was talking about how I was going to finish off these little holes for the trim. So I added a wing nut in there, and it was just enough resin to hold it in place when I was fitting the whole car together. And you know, at this part I wanted that to be exactly where I needed it. So as long as there's enough resin for you to take it back apart, you know, you let it cure. This is what I basically made it look like. That's all that I wanted. I wanted to make like a little hump that was easy to finish and sand. And here's the one on the other side. So I added these to the roof wing because, you know, when you flip it over, the trim piece is gonna bolt to the car at the bottom, and then I did this way at the top instead of, you know, using any kind of adhesive or whatever. So I figured that's gonna work. Now what I'm doing is I'm wet sanding the whole underneath of it, and then I'm gonna flip it over and wet sand the outside. We're getting this one ready to paint. But remember, you wanna do a nice solid paint job on this whole car. If it hasn't been painted at least once, use really good quality materials, and do a finish, you know, on a lot of the undersides too, because the car really just isn't complete unless you do that. I know some people wanna wrap the car and that's cool, but remember, the value of the car is going to be so much better if people know there's a solid paint job under it, even if you wrap it. So if there's not, they know there's a lot of work that needs to be done. They're like, oh, it hasn't even been painted yet. So that's what we're doing. This is my roof wing, hopefully getting sprayed today.
Ever since I can remember, I don't know, it probably started in the 90s with that movie The Craft. I was in love with Neve Campbell, and you know, she was one of the witches in that movie. And I think ever since then I've had a thing for the witchy kind of witchcraft, like, I don't know, pagan type stuff, like, and I thought it would be really neat to maybe like put the pinnacle star on the car. And just to kind of theme it a little bit, you know, we could just say it's like witchy themed. And every now and then I meet a kind of gothy girl. I'm just like, oh man, I'm gonna find a witch one day. Like, and I actually met one from England recently. She was the sweetest girl ever, and she's like, yeah, I'm actually a witch. You know, I'm just like, well, that's crazy, but you should move here. But she was actually visiting for a bit, so that was really cool. So I thought it would be neat to add this little pinnacle symbol, you know, and then in some ways people think it's a bad, like, I guess, you know, certain groups will point the thing upside down and it becomes like people will say they're devil worshippers or whatever, who knows. But anyway, I thought that looked pretty cool on here, and that's kind of why I did it. It's just something different, you know, and it shows a little bit of my spiritual kind of, my love for the moon and all things magical. And as you could see, I started with the teal base coat, just a little spot where it was going to go. I had my decal that I cut on the Cricut cutter, and that was some silver vinyl that I had, and that's why you see the star, it looks like a silver color. But as I peel that silver decal off, now you can see that the teal color's left underneath the black right there. So that's kind of how it's working, and we'll get it all ready for clear. I did make a little bit of a mistake where I could have put this thing a bit further back so it would miss the trim piece, but I found a really cool way to round out the trim piece and kind of go around it, and it actually looks really neat. So it was kind of one of those mistakes that turned into something that was kind of, it looked intentional more so, but it allowed me to adjust that trim piece and just give it a little character, I guess. Now once that clear was dry, I decided it was time for me to kind of go over the car, at least, you know, the body where it's painted. And I wanted to get out my little spray wax. I have friends that come over and everyone's always got this urge to like wipe the dust. What they don't realize is the dust usually is fiberglass dust. and that's not something you want to wipe on the paint. It's just like rubbing sand into the clear coat. So I've had to tell my friends, just because I know this, like everyone has that urge, like they come in and I say, hey, you know, just, it's cool to look at it, just please don't touch the clear because that dust will scratch it. You know, everybody always wants to wipe dust and kind of have to be funny about it, but you know, they're all cool, they understand. But it's just like, I decided, let's go ahead and use the wax, and you know, you can lightly knock this dust off without putting any pressure on the rag, and you know, it seemed to be just fine. But that way I would put this roof wing on with everything nice and clean, and give it kind of a fresh start. Now, being that I've taken some interiors out of classic cars and vehicles before and kind of, you know, had to put things back, I understand that, but I've never actually built an interior, like basically where, you know, you're just getting these raw parts that are untrimmed and having to, you know, fit things together and figure it out. Like, this is definitely a first for me on this. Now, I don't really know if there's really a good outline on how to say that you should do this interior. I feel like you could look at the headliner, the two rear panels, and that center panel, the one that looks like a big T. You could probably look at all those as one section, because the headliner needs to fit in first, but you also need to trim those two rear sections. But if you go like right up at the top where it meets the headliner, there's a curve, and it kind of needs to follow the headliner properly. So I'd say, you know, you need to fit these pieces in kind of at the same time. Now, you're gonna get to a point where you hold the headliner up there and you kind of can see where it's supposed to go, but you're gonna have to trim a little off the sides, maybe even off the front a little. And that's what was really tricky for me with this one, was I didn't want to cut too much. So that's a good section to start with. Now, the dash and the console you could almost look at as kind of a separate, you know, sector of the interior. You could break it into a few pieces if you want. You know, you could say there's a headliner and those rear pieces, and then you say that console, even though it fits between the T piece and the rear, it's one of those things where you can kind of work with it with the dash a little bit more. And as long as you cut it short enough in the front, it's gonna set just right with that T-piece. You just have to make sure you're shortening it little by little to get it fitted. So yeah, at some point all this stuff kind of connects, but you can kind of mess with the dash as like its own separate entity. And there's a lot to do on the dash too. So that's kind of how I started, was really with the headliner and those rear pieces. You know, I used the seat belts that I ordered on Amazon, and as a matter of fact, like, I'm glad that I left one of the old mounting bolts on the bottom for each side, because I was able to mount the seatbelt reel there, and you can use like a bracket. You know, you can kind of reinforce those things as long as you left enough metal. You can use that bolt hole that's there. And I didn't have a video of this, but there's the two little tabs that hook into the actual reel itself. And if you bend one of those tabs straight, it's going to allow you to use the other tab to position that reel at a little bit of an angle. you'll see, like, if you're, you've got your top seatbelt points welded in, you'll see the angle that reel kind of needs to set where it's gonna face like forward, and you'll get it. But it was just tricky. There was a lot of like things that were just unknown territory for me getting this interior going, and I'm glad now that I'm at a point where I feel like I've kind of got a lot of it figured out. But it was a lot, So we're gonna get into it with the headliner here a little bit, and I'll explain the way that I got this thing mounted in. Alright, before you get going with the headliner, there's a few things that are kind of important that you're probably going to want to get a hold of so that you're not just sitting there with none of these materials trying to make some progress. Now, first of all, I used 2 brackets in the front, and those are the ones that you'll see. I'm going to go through the process of how I install this in a little bit more detail, but I used wider brackets, and I think they're all made by Simpson Strong Tie. I think they were 18 gauge, so if you go to your home improvement store or whatever, don't worry about getting the super thick brackets, okay? I think they were 18 gauge, I'm pretty sure, and it's a little bit of a thinner steel, but they're still good and strong, but it also gives them, a little bit of that flexibility, so they're just not so rigid. You're going to want some of the metal drilling self-tapping screws, most likely, run by Phillips bit. That way, they're strong enough to drill into the roll cage. Some of the holes I probably drilled with a drill bit first, but these self-tapping screws are usually pretty good about being able to go into that roll cage bar. Those are going to hold the brackets where you want them. So it's 2 wide brackets in the front, and then 2 of the narrower ones that go in the back. And I'm going to go into detail kind of on how I mounted these. But another thing that's kind of nice to get is the black Allen wrench driven panhead screws, and I believe I used 10-24, but I think that's because the rivet nut size that I had. A lot of times I'm going off of what size rivet nuts that I have to drive, so I'll get the screws that fit whatever I feel like is kind of, I have a lot of different sizes, but I may not have all the different thread pitches, so that's what I got. Those are good to have. That way they're going to kind of look nice. If you don't use the little screw covers, you still have some dark black screws, so they're not very noticeable. Sometimes it's just a matter of having, a few things to work with, and you kind of decide if you want to use them or not. Once the headliner's done, I went ahead and bought this insulation. This isn't really necessary right now for building out the headliner and kind of fitting it, but at least if you buy this stuff, you'll have it for later, because they say you do want to throw some insulation on tops, because if you're in a place with a lot of heat, there's AC in the car, but anything you can do to insulate, which the headliner does have some space to put some of this this duct insulation in, and why not use it? Let's see, another thing that you're going to want to consider is a dome light. I went on Amazon and I found this really cool dome light, and it seems to be made pretty well. It allows you to switch from white to blue to green or red, which I kind of wish it would let me color mix and get kind of like a turquoise or teal color or something, but I guess they're just not that high tech. Maybe I just didn't find the right one. But I like the look of this particular dome light. It kind of has this industrial, like, tough look that almost like if you like the superhero side of the fact that the Vaydor was in the Joker movie or Suicide Squad, like this kind of fits that theme too, like the whole superhero looking, this dome light has like kind of a cool shape and design to it. But really I just want something a little different, and I like the fact that it allows you to change to a few different colors. So grab a dome light, order one of those. If you gotta wait for it to come in, find something that you like, and that way this can be part of your headliner install. You're gonna wanna figure out where you need to run a wire, and which holes you need to drill, and all that good stuff. So that's a few things that are going to help you with this part of the install. If you get these things early, that way you have them. And not to mention, if I didn't already, some rivet nuts. Whatever size screws that you get to fasten this headliner in, you're going to want to get some rivet nuts so that you can install them in your brackets and make it to where, you know, you're not just screwing into sheet metal. Rivet nuts are always a better way to go. It's more of a permanent type of fastening that you can take apart and put together as many times as you need to till you get it right.
All right, now I'm fitting in the headliner, and this is a chore for sure. So there's been a lot that I've done. Now, one thing you're going to want to do first probably is just rough fit, like you're going to have to rough trim and fit those 3 pieces because they help you hold up the headliner a little. I can't talk tonight. But if you can at least get those things to set in, they're going to help hold the headliner up enough to where you can work up here in the front and get it lined up where you want it. Don't make any of that stuff permanent. Like I said, there's self-tapping screws kind of in there. I've trimmed the parts to where it follows the window pretty good, and I kind of know how I want them to sit, but they're still not completely in place. I just needed them to hold up stuff. So basically what I've done in the front is I wanted to have areas that I could screw the headliner, even if it's temporary. I'm trying to use visors in this car because I don't know if it's going to really obstruct the limited visibility that you already have.
Alright, go ahead and scratch the stock visor idea for now. I thought I would try to get the original G35 visors to work, but you have such a small, you know, they say visibility's bad in the Vaydor. I don't really think it's bad, it's just a smaller, you know, area that you're used to in like a normal car with a higher roof. And, you know, really, that shouldn't matter too much because, I mean, how high do you really need your windshield to go? But, you know, even having that visor, I was able to figure out that they would fit, and I would, you know, kind of found a way that I would position the little piece to fasten them. But it's like a whole nother inch of pretty much bulkiness, and I said, you know, let's not do that. Let's just roll without visors for now, and if for some reason I drive the car and I realize that I need a visor, I'll probably build some kind of like nice little carbon fiber rectangle that, you know, swings down, just something real simple that doesn't take up a lot of space and make that work. But for now we're just going to roll without it and kind of see how it goes. One point about this also is I've kind of realized when you have such a low roof, if the sun happens to come down and get in your face for a minute, you should just be able to scoot yourself up in your seat kind of temporarily, and it'll put the roof back in front of the sun, you know, like, so basically it gets out of your face. I think that's probably what you kind of have to do in this car, and hope that it's not able to really blind you for very long before it goes down below some trees or the horizon or something like that. So we'll see.
But what I did was I took one of these brackets that you get from your home improvement store, and I kind of rounded the corners off so it's nicer, but it goes against the roll cage bar up there. Let's see if we can look inside. All right, you see the bar that runs that way. Now this bracket is gonna sit up there, and you're gonna screw it with 2 of those, the lower holes. You're gonna pretty much screw it to the middle of that bar. Now what I had to do on the other side was I had to eyeball it and try to put it exactly where it needed to go. Just before I go even further on this, like, one thing you need to understand about fitting in this headliner is you need to be prepared to put it in and take it out like 20 times, maybe 30. But for every screw that you put in, you pretty much need to check, or you need to kink the bracket. Like, I put 1 screw in the bracket over there, and then I pressed the headliner into it, and once I knew that my height was correct, I let the headliner angle the bracket because I only had 1 screw in it. So I let it basically turn the bracket the way that it needed to set when I pressed it up, and that really, it was actually perfect on that side. So now I need to do the same thing to this side, but I'm probably going to loosen that screw a little bit so that I can work, at least slide the bracket in there, get a good eyeball on it, and then I can kind of see just by pulling down this edge. I can look in there and see. I know you can't see with that wire in the way, but I'm going to be able to tell which way this bracket kind of needs to set so that I get the angle as close as possible. So that's what I'm doing. I've got the other side pretty good. It's actually, if you can see, it's setting up in there pretty good over there, and then this side needs to come up, but it'll press up in there. And once I get this bracket where it goes, then it's gonna work. This is tricky. This is definitely a higher challenge level. But I think once the headliner's in, everything else should hopefully go in a little easier. And of course, it's not going to be permanently mounted. This is all just kind of the rough fitting, because I'm getting ready to paint the roof wing and put that back on. And once that's all nice and tight, I can make things a little more permanent, because I don't have to work on that anymore. So that's what I'm doing right now. All right, remember, this is just for getting a good eyeball on it. Okay, I'm going to push the screwdriver. I've got my mark where I pretty much want that thing to center. All right, and I just need to work that bracket a little bit further over. And when I get it right where I want it, sitting up against the bar, and then my little mark pretty much where it needs to be, I'm gonna look up from the side and I'm gonna eyeball the angle. And it's also gonna show me the gap between the bracket where it L's down. I need to see the gap between the pipe, the roll cage pipe, and I also need to see the angle. That's what I'm looking for right now. Now I know it's not setting exactly the way that I need it, but if you look in there, you can see kind of, you know, what it's showing me. And of course, this isn't, you know, the way it's gonna sit. I gotta actually push up the headliner a little bit. Here, let me zoom back out. So I actually have to push this up and try to look in there. But that's how I'm gonna get, this is tricky. Like I said, it's not easy, but the other side is already done, so I'm thinking I can get this side done as well. All right, continuing on, you can see I've got one bracket that's got the 2 screws, because I already got that one where it goes. So as I was saying, put 1 screw in when you're doing these brackets. Now I'm gonna grab the headliner, I'm gonna slide it into place again, make sure it pretty much sets correctly in the back, okay? And then we're gonna put that screw in, because we want this to be held where it's already placed. All right, as soon as that screws in, I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna squeeze the headliner against this bracket so that it turns this. Now, this is pretty tight, but you want it to be, but just enough to where the headliner, you know, when you squeeze it against it, you want it to correct this angle a little bit. Then you pull the headliner back out and you put in the second screw, so that way it holds it in place. And once that's good, you should have plenty of area now that you can hold the headliner up in the front. You know, either using a temporary screw here, or you can go over to the sides and build the visor anchors and stuff like that. I'm gonna have places that would hold the visors even if I don't have them in, but that's why I'm doing all this too, because this is actually where the hook would go. So there's gonna be metal here in case I need to put the visor hooks and all that stuff, but it's basically 14 inches from the edge. So that's how it's going. I'm gonna grab that headliner and see if I can get this one fastened up solid. Okay, one thing that's kind of a small detail, probably doesn't matter to many people, but since these brackets are built with this like staggered pattern on them, kind of, one is gonna have a hole here, and then the other one, it's gonna be further in. So I took the time to just drill the hole, take a measurement so that both sides are symmetrical, and hopefully both sides are fine when you put the headliner up, and whatever ends up happening, whether I use these holes permanently or it ends up turning into the visor hooks or whatever it is, I just want things to be symmetrical. So either both of them are right, or if I gotta fix something, well then I'm gonna fix both of them. So at least they're the same. Okay, as of right now, the headliner is pretty much ready to be upholstered. besides a few holes that I got to fill in. Now back there, I made a couple holes so that I can access those roof wing bolts if that thing ever has to come off. Those holes are going to have black filler plugs, so the upholstery is going to go into the hole a little bit, have the black filler plug. Should look all right. The dome light's mounted. I've got the screws and my brackets that you guys saw me putting on before, so that's all good. Headliner's up nice and tight now. And I think that's kind of the point that it needs to be at, where it's pretty much ready for upholstery. Now, I'm still gonna wait because I need to get the windshield set in just to, just to temporarily put it there. I need to see where that wire for the rearview mirror is gonna run, and probably cut a little notch out of the headliner piece so it runs, easily through there and doesn't feel like it's squished. But otherwise, there's not a whole lot left to do to the headliner. I also have 2 screws in the back that hold it up as well.
Okay, the trick for these 2 screws that go at the back of the headliner is basically to remove the lower seatbelt cover panels. When you take those out, if you've already got those front screws in, or do one side at a time so at least the other corner is held up. If you've got the 2 front screws holding, you can take out one of those rear side panels, and you can pretty much set the smaller brackets that I showed you guys earlier. You can set it up there in a way where you can see that the bracket is going to hit the bar on the roll cage. And it's actually fairly easy to take a self-tapping screw on your drill and get it into that bracket, so it sits flat on the it sits flat on the headliner. And once you get it, secured to that roll cage, you can just basically drill out. If you can see through the fiberglass in the headliner just enough, or you can put like a flashlight in there, you can literally drill through the headliner into the bracket where the pre-drilled hole already is, and then just, take the headliner back down, shoot a rivet nut in there, and you're good to go. So that's pretty much what I did for the rear bolts. It's not super tricky, but once you take one of those side panels out, you'll see how you can access and position one of those narrower brackets to actually get up there and do the job for you. The main important thing to note on this part is that when you set the little bracket up there, just to kind of see where it's going to go, just don't forget to push the headliner up as high as you can get it, or where you know that it needs to go. If you had that side panel in, there should have been a place that you found either the headliner is going to just set as high as possible, or maybe you've got something worked out where it needs to go at a certain place. For me, I was pushing the headliner up until it touched the metal or the roof. So that's basically what you want to make sure that you're doing, is know where that thing is going to go before you put any of those holes in the cage. Overall, with this interior, there's definitely a thought process. You kind of got to get your mind into it and figure out, what do I do first? I mean, there's just, once you line it out, it comes together.
You got to get one piece at a time, figure out what all needs to be mounted to it, how it's going to mount to the car, and then say, boom, it's done. Let's get some cloth on it. Same thing what I'm doing to the dash now, that's why it's back out. And then I'll slowly work these other pieces and try to get them fitted better as we go too.
I'm still kind of working with these rear panels a little bit. They're just weird the way that they're molded, and at some point you're going to have to say, well, if the bottom doesn't line up just right, it's the top that's probably more important, because that's where you're going to see out of the window and you want it to look. The bottom of these panels, I think one part ends up a little lower than the other. The seat is going to be there, so you should really never see that. I mean, if it's a little off, but you kind of got to go with what you can see. These are still kind of a work in progress, but I think leaving some bit of a gap for your upholstery material to go in between those 2 panels is definitely going to be important too. Now, I know I've said it many times before, but if you're just popping into this part of the video and you've never seen any of these Vaydor build videos before, when you buy this kit, okay, and typically, I mean, pretty much any kit car you buy, you're not buying parts that are just going to be bolted together. You're actually having to turn the pieces into parts. So this dash is a good example of that. You're going to get your interior kit from Vaydor. There's going to be areas that need to be trimmed and cut out where things have to pass through, like your AC vents, yada yada, all that good stuff. This is one that you're going to have to, just like everything else, you got to put it in a few times, make some marks, take it out, trim a few other things. I mean, once you get the dash to initially fit, that's, it's going to be like kind of straightforward. Really depending on how you want to set up your control panel. So, there's the clock piece that's got to pass through the top a little bit. Like I said, I mentioned already the AC vents, but that's going to be, the middle and the sides. Now also you're going to have to build panels, because you don't get the panels that would be like a false airbag cover or whatever you want to call it. Kind of goes up above the glove box area, and it looks like there's an indentation. Like, I used the dash itself for the mold to make those carbon fiber pieces and stuff like that. So this is just one of those things where you got to take some time. You're gonna have to fill in the little voids and the holes that are missing fiberglass, and just take out little bits at a time where you think something needs to go. Use your best judgment, and eventually you'll start to see things come together and kind of figure out the game plan for it all.
Gone around, I've cut some things out that I feel like are necessary. Now, I don't know what condition that all the other dashes are in. Mine, I feel like, was pretty bad. Maybe this one's better than some, I don't know. But there's areas where there were bubbles or, fiberglass basically missing. So like you've got this rolled edge. I think if you put fabric on it, it's gonna show. Like there's certain areas where it would probably sink in and it might look crappy. So I've gone around and I had already filled some of the other bad ones before. I haven't sanded these all the way out yet. But I feel like it's kind of necessary to almost body work these interior panels with the resin and added in the flocked cotton, or flocks as we know of it. Make some filler putty. That's what I've done here. It's resin with the cotton flocking. And when you fill these, this was like dipped in, and it's not gonna look good. If you try to get the interior stuff on there, I feel like it's gonna show all that. So I'm basically body working this dash in the places that are bad, but without Bondo. I'm using resin so that it's solid. You prep it real good, the same way you would do any other fiberglass repairs. That way, when we go to glue the upholstery on, we're gonna have a good solid surface, and any of those repairs are actually solid as well. It's not just gonna be like Bondo or body filler. So this side had quite a big dip in it too. I actually had to fix, I want to say it was that side over there. The whole thing before had like a hole in it. It was practically almost detached and cracked up. But I don't know if that was from shipping or just pulling it off a mold or what. So it's tricky. I mean, you can see there's some stress cracks and stuff in there. For the most part, you're never going to see this. So as long as it's holding together structurally. But I feel like it was in rough shape. Just, I don't know, transport, who knows, maybe sitting in storage in the place where the guy had it for a while. I don't know. But I feel like it probably came that way. They're just, it's just basically giving you, like I said before, it's giving you enough to build this car. You're not really getting parts that are ready to go in that you just put together. This is building a car at its best. And so we're letting it all cure, and hopefully the next time I fit the dash in, I can get some other things done, like figure out exactly where my stereo is going to go, get my air ride switches and gauge kind of run through the hole down there, the rectangles where those wires are going to come through, and hopefully make some progress on some of these interior tasks that I've been kind of brainstorming about. So it's coming together.
I always like to send a friendly shout out to Melvin from Vaydor. He's been super helpful, and he's always there to kind of answer questions, even if he's busy. He's usually really cool about either calling back or saying, hey, call me in like 20 minutes or whatever. And he told me that with this kit, you've got the dash, but you don't get the two filler panels that basically go, it would be like almost like a false airbag panel on the passenger side. And then there's a panel on the driver's side that you have to make, where it's just basically under or kind of behind the gauge cluster. These panels don't come with the interior kit, but they're pretty easy to make. And what you basically got to do is use the dash as your mold. And that's what I'm doing on this section. Is I found that, you know, back in the day when I did a lot of aircraft work, I would use masking tape a lot because I just didn't want resin on a piece that I'm gonna have to use. I mean, even though you can use a good release agent, still kind of what I'm using on the tape. It was just a safer net that I got used to using masking tape. So if it's not like a huge part, I'll line the bottom with the masking tape and then I'll mold the piece on it so that I know even if for some weird reason the release agent were to fail, I still have tape between it, so it gives me a chance to like separate them. But for the most part, this worked out really well, and you know, he was the one that gave me that idea. He kind of told me how to do it. He said, you know, make the panel by using your dash as a mold, and after that, it's just kind of your imagination. You know, I was able to trim these panels, you know, leave about an 1/8 of an inch gap all the way around, and that gives you some space if you want to come back and add a carbon fiber layer, which I eventually ended up doing. And you know, or whatever you want to do, put some suede or something around it. And I'll go through this little section and show you guys how I did these panels.
There's an AC vent that gets cut out, so you end up wanting to put the vent in this outer panel that you make, and that way you can deal with all the ducting and stuff. You know, you can kind of cut a big piece out of there. You really just end up leaving enough lip to where you have a way to clip that piece that you build. But this is basically the mold. So this is, you know, passenger side, and what we want to do is tape this up kind of nice. You know, I get it to where it follows the curves real good, and I'm gonna wipe a really thin layer of grease on this, or you want to have some kind of release agent or whatever. So that's gonna be the mold. Now what I'm doing in here is I took some masking paper, I laid it in here, and I used my fingernail to go around and make like a pattern, and then I came and I cut my piece of paper to give me a nice little rough, you know, piece. Here, let's zoom this out. So that's gonna give me a little rough cut piece. So I'm gonna make I'm gonna pre-cut 2 or 3 pieces of fiberglass. And you know, with chop mat, you might only need to do 1 because I'm gonna use 2 or 3 more layers of cloth. I want that to be like the finishing. Cloth to me is just better. I like to use chop mat maybe just to build a little bit of thickness, but really for this I may not need more than 1 piece. So I'm going to probably cut 1 to start with, and then I'm going to cut a few pieces, maybe 2 or 3 of the cloth, and somewhere around those layers is probably going to be enough for this project. But I'm going to lay it in there, put some resin on it, and once it cures, I should have a nice little panel that fits the contour. Okay, I've got my pre-cut pieces. I ended up doing 2 of chop mat and then 2 of the woven cloth, which I don't know if you guys remember. Somewhere back in the build, I ordered a nice large piece and kind of folded it up. It's like a big blanket of that woven cloth. It's good to order that stuff in bulk because if you buy those little packs at Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever, they're gonna probably cost you a lot by the time you're done with this car. It's way better to just buy a big roll or a big piece of it. So these should be ready. I think it's gonna be enough. If not, I'll cut another layer or 2 in the process, but this at least gets most of that done, so hopefully I don't have to stop when I'm doing resin and all that. So we'll see how it comes out.
Now, I'm sure I've told you, fiberglass work can be extremely messy. It takes, I would say, years or at least a lot of practice to get good with fiberglass and composites where you can be efficient with it and not so messy. Now that's the only reason I did it in the car, and I also put a big piece of paper over the carpet, but my goal is still to not drip any of the resin, and you'll see as I go through and do this that I didn't really drip any past the mold where I wanted it to go.
Alright, here's my cool little dash filler airbag, whatever, false airbag thing. So it's coming up like a little bit. I'm slowly getting it to release, and it's releasing from the tape okay, like where I use the grease, but This might be one of those where it's just better for me to peel the tape with it, and it's slowly coming. I'm just letting it kind of, you know, do little bits at a time. It'll end up popping off. Now sometimes when you use the grease, you might have to use some heat. It just like, it could be like suctioned on there, you know. It's just, you never know. It's coming off. I think it came out really nice. Like, for the most part, the quality of it looks really good. So it's a good 2 layers of chop mat and 2 layers of the woven cloth. And then once I get it pulled off, I'll just, you know, cut along the line really nice, make a nice piece out of it, and then decide if I'm going to cover it or do carbon fiber or what. I don't know yet. So there's that. Okay, so here's my piece I just made, and man, this is cool. Like, I haven't got to do stuff like this since I was working on aircraft, but you can see it's a nice solid, you know, good solid piece. It's a good thickness. It's real firm with those 2 layers of chop, 2 layers of woven cloth. And man, like, you know, there's a few voids here and there, but that's like no big deal. For the most part, you can get away, if you've got the experience and the practice, you don't have to have a vacuum bagging system, and you can get a pretty nice layout. I need to trim the edges before I get stabbed with all these little sharp pieces. There's definitely some sharp ones on there that are, you know, hardened from the resin. But here's the outside. And if, you know, you were gonna paint this, you'd just end up doing a thin coat of Bondo or something. Even carbon fiber, I might lay a coat of resin mixed with some of the flocks, and I would like try to smooth it out. Basically put a good coat of that resin on there, block it down once it dried, and then I would do the carbon fiber so it's nice and straight. But I don't know what I'm going to do with this panel yet as far as the finish. It might just get covered with some suede or something. But for the most part, it's really cool. It released good from the tape because I used that grease. It just didn't do it while it was on the dash. But once I got it pulled off, the tape peeled off it pretty easily. So there's that, and it really fits awesome like a glove. I mean, it's almost like it suctions on there. It's just amazing. So that's really cool. Like, I wish you could, yeah, when you lift it up, you actually can feel like it's got a little bit of a vacuum. So that's cool. It's that's a good fit. This was a success for sure. Okay, so being that this side was a success, I made that cover panel. Let me zoom out a bit. That one came out good, and then I just made the one for this side, so it's curing now.
Getting these panels to fasten on was just as important to me, or more, than how I made the things. I didn't want something that was going to come off easily, you know, but something that is maintainable, and something that if you need to take it apart, it'll allow you to do that over and over again without breaking stuff. One of my biggest, you know, annoyances with the automotive industry, at least they seem to be getting better with it over the years, but you know, when they first started making door panels that were held on by plastic clips where they popped on instead of having screws like in the, you know, 80s or whatever, the biggest annoyance was that these things break, you know, before you know it, you're trying to pull off a door panel to fix a crappy window regulator or something, but you break all the clips or you break the tabs that hold the clips in the process. And I was like, I don't want my panels to be that way. If I decided tomorrow that I want to start a supercar company, I would not want my panels to be made crappy where people couldn't take stuff apart and, you know, have to worry about breaking a very, you know, valuable part of that panel and have to like replace the whole thing. So I devised a plan to install some nice metal tabs that would hold these panels on, and I thought this was really cool. This was, to me, like the bread and butter of my creativity. I love this kind of stuff, and this right here is just, it goes to show that if you use your imagination, you can make stuff as cool as you want to. And I'm going to show you guys how I installed these clips. And of course you've needed to go around and trim everything to get the panel to fit nice. I left about a 1/8 gap around the whole panel, but that's also going to be fine-tuned as you're putting in the clips, so you know exactly where that panel is going to sit. Of course, before you do too much more to these parts, you want to give them a really good thorough sanding on that top layer of fiberglass, typically some 80 grit. I'm not really tearing it up with 36 grit unless I really need to bring the glass down a bit. But I'll do a final scuff with the 36 before I put any more resin products on. But I'm going to be kind of grinding down that top layer, seeing if 80 grit does the job first. So we're getting all into that now.
Okay, I wanted to stop for a second to explain kind of what's going on. So these two lighter looking pieces you see are the ones I had to build. Now, if you don't understand the process of building parts kind of like this, building this whole Vaydor could be a lot more difficult. And the reason I say that is because this is kind of a very foundation type thing. Like if you know how to use a mold and build some pieces out of fiberglass and make them come out fairly nice, you're going to be able to build this car a lot easier, because everything you do as far as getting the body bonded and things like that, you're going to have a better understanding for how things should go together when it comes to composites in general. There's a certain way that you want to like hold things together, depending on if you're going to like, steel to fiberglass, you're making that transition where the body meets the old car, things like that. All this kind of stuff right here pays off. But if you don't know, try to get some experience with that before you try and build a kit car, because it's really going to help you out when it comes to things you have to figure out on your own. Now, as far as these pieces, I was told, you want to use the dash as a mold, make these little fillers. I was like, okay, that's cool. So right now, the panels are in pretty decent shape. They're just kind of re-prepped. You can see my tape lines on the back when I put tape on the dash. It kind of forms to that, but I sand them down a little bit. It's not really a big deal because it's the inside. So most likely there's going to be a vent here on the end and then one on the very end of that one. I'm waiting for my vents to come in, so I can't cut those holes just yet. But I can still do some work to these panels. Now what I'm thinking is fastening them on. I've got some GM style clips, and I could talk about this more, but these are the ones that I found. I could even give the part number. What I'm thinking is, at first I thought, well, what if I make a slot through this side and then I slip it through? But what happens is the clip is not going to protrude through enough after the thickness of this panel is taken into consideration. So, and what would happen is the little catch that you see on here, let's lay it down, it's basically right where it sticks out. So you would need enough room in there to know that that clip is still going to catch this piece when it clicks down. Click just like that. So really, that leaves not much, there isn't much gap at all between it. Like if we were trying to put it through the panel, that's already going to pull this clip too far out. So what I think I'm going to do is, since these clips are originally meant to slip onto a piece of plastic, if you see those little teeth in there, man, this is kind of hard to video, but if you get one of these clips and you look up close, there's little teeth inside. Now you can see it's like the little V right here in the center. You see the little V, those are actually separate teeth. Okay, there we go, that's better. Now you can see those little prongs. What this is meant to do is, if you had like a piece of sheet metal, or let's say most of these panels will have like, a trim panel in a GM vehicle would be made like this, but it would have a piece of plastic, like a flat tab of plastic off of it. So this clip would slip onto that flat tab and then it would stay there. That's how it would hold. And when these things pop into place, they're holding the panel because it's got that flat tab. What I'm thinking I'm gonna do is cut slots, and I'm gonna take a piece of sheet metal and bend it into a 90 degree. Now I don't have this visual right now, but this is just me brainstorming. I'm gonna take a 90 degree piece of sheet metal and I'm gonna cut a slot and slip the straight side through there. And that's gonna leave me a flat piece of metal here that I'm gonna fiberglass over. Or my other thought is, if I decide that I'm gonna put a little bit of carbon on these, just, even if I end up covering them, at least there's carbon there if I don't want to cover them, so that'd be kind of cool. But when you put the new layers of like flocks, that's another thing. Before doing the carbon, you can see I've got some waves and imperfections just because fiberglass is hard to get perfectly straight when you're building the part. What I would do first is I'm going to take a coat of my flocks filler, some resin mixed, with the cotton, and I'm going to put a nice swipe over the whole thing, and then I'm going to let it dry, and I'm going to sand it really smooth as if I'm body working it like Bondo. But all that's going to get done over the piece of sheet metal that I insert through the slots. So I'm thinking if I put 4 slots, okay, and then put a little 90-degree sheet metal tab through it, that's going to give me a nice strong tab for these to slip onto. And then the panel's basically just going to pop into some holes that I make or some slots that I make for these parts. Now another thing is when you're dealing with fiberglass, I don't know where that went. Let me grab the other one really quick. So when you're dealing with like fiberglass, here I'll just show you through the box. You can see how these clips have, the little things that catch. So what you're going to want to do is probably grab some pliers and bend those little catch prongs, the ones that are going to compress a bit to go in the panel. I would say bend those things in a little bit to where you don't have to make such a large hole and where they're not catching so tight, so that I don't need this panel to be held on like it's going to be outside in the wind. I just need it held on tight enough to where it takes a bit of a firm grip. You can pop it off, but that's all going to come into how you adjust these little clips to work with you. But I think that's what I'm going to do here. Even though I said it's kind of brainstorming, that's what I think I'm going to do to finish these panels. I'm going to install some sheet metal pieces to make tabs for these clips. Of course, making sure that I don't do it where the vent's going to go. So I already did a nice cutout. I'm probably going to put maybe one tab way up here, way down here, and then same thing on the other side. And over here on this side, this panel came out really nice, but it's got some waves in it too, and that's why I've re-sanded it, because we're gonna put some flocks filler on it and make it real smooth. But I'm thinking on this one, I could maybe put one of the clips here, maybe one up here, maybe I could do one here, and then here. That way I still get 4, and it's still gonna hold this piece down really nice. But that's I'm really happy with the way these came out. If you get some experience, you know what you're doing, you can make some really nice fiberglass parts, and you'd be amazed how lightweight these are. This was, remember, 2 layers of chop mat and 2 layers of woven cloth on top. And so that's what I think I'm gonna do. Now, another thing I wanted to explain before I finish this little segment is when it comes to the trimming of these. Let's see where I can put this so I'm not losing it again. All right, when it comes to trimming this, I have a nice gap kind of going on over here. Remember, you're going to have fabric or leather on the dash, so it's going to take up some space. You want to leave somewhere around maybe an 1/8 inch of a gap around the whole thing. But you can see I've got it good here. I don't have it good over here, so if I were to move it over, that's going to make this gap even smaller. Down here, we're kind of working it, but it also depends on where you do it. I feel like this whole piece, if you look at the way this is, the whole piece down here could actually have a good 1/8 inch or so trimmed off of it. So it just means you need to have the grinder in your hand. I'm pretty much using my little right angle die grinder, and it pretty much, like, the best way to do this is going to be having this thing in your hand. Look at it, pull it off, grind it down a bit, pop it back on, look at it again. Keep doing it, because you need to just be shaving off the pieces and fine-tuning that thing as good as you can get it. Because if you don't cover it with upholstery, like some suede or whatever, if you do end up doing carbon fiber, you want it to leave a really nice edge. You want it to look like it follows the dash pretty good. Even though the leather on the dash is going to give you some forgiveness as far as like how perfect it has to look, If it was going to be like paint against paint, you know, or something shiny against shiny, it would really show you if your lines are off. But when it comes to like leather against shiny carbon fiber or something, it's a little bit more forgiving as long as you get this gap as precise as you can all the way around. So that was another thing I wanted to highlight. So that was a nice little long bit for this section, but that's what I think I'm gonna do to get these panels finished up and ready to put this dash back in.
So to get the placement for the clips, I start by taping the panel temporarily to the dash, kind of right about where I want it to sit. And then I'm going to drill some really small holes, and that's going to give me some guides to where I make the slot lines and start cutting for those clip tabs to go through. And you'll see, I can explain it as I go here, but that's basically how you want to start. You just want to make sure you drill all the way through the dash so that your tabs line up with the slot that you cut in the dash whenever you put this all together. It's good to start that way. Even though you're going to adjust the holes in the dash that receive your clips, you're going to adjust them a little bit. It's just good to start with all this stuff being pierced all the way through. That way, you know, it all starts lining up, and you can kind of keep it that way.
Alright, so right here you can see some of the little hardware pieces I was talking about that I had to make. These are going to be resined over with the flocks because I'm going to put a nice skim coat so that I can block it down real nice, and then probably do carbon fiber on top of it, and it won't have all these little ripples. So what I had to make is these pieces that go on top are just angled pieces like this. So one side stuck through that little slot, and then what happens is I'm going to take the little clip, once those are all fiberglassed in and you can't even see them anymore from the outside, it's going to be sticking through, and then this little clip will slip on to that piece right there. So that's how it's going to go, just basically on here. Now in a second I'll take this panel off, I just wasn't ready to do that. So I built enough to do this one and then two on top over there. Now the bottom is a little different. I built this these little joggle pieces. Now I know that there's some piece of hardware out there that probably would have did this job. I don't know if it would have been the, you know, 1/4 inch or so that I needed as far as the depth there. But if you can see from the inside, let's go under here. It hooks through a little hole, and then right there. And, you know, you could actually cut this whole extra bit off if you wanted, as long as it hooks the bottom, as long as there's enough lip to hook. I just put holes for now in case I wanted some of this excess here. But you can also see my other tabs that are sticking through, and that's where those clips are going to be. So when you pull the panel off, you're basically going to have to do it from the top. Let's see if I have a way to do this. You're going to have to do it from the top, pry it up a bit. And that's okay, that piece fell out. Anyway, it'll pry up, and then you'll unhook it from the bottom. I'll just pull those out for now. So yeah, anyway, it's going to come up this way, and then you'll slide it off to get the other tabs unhooked from under there. So you can see what I've done here. Now, I wanted to show you if I put one of these through, the way that it looks. So from down here, okay, it came through. Now, when it folds over, it's going to have that extra bit so that it can hook into that little hole that's going in here. All right, now we see it coming through, and it's going to hook just like that. Boom. And then the top pieces will clip in. So that's pretty neat. I'm pretty happy with this. Now, the main thing is when I install all these pieces permanently, you want to make sure that they're flat. So whatever you have to do, most likely I'm going to take this panel, and from the other side, I'm going to use masking tape in some kind of creative way to get these things to hold. Like maybe if this piece is sticking through like that, I might put some stuff up under here, or do something to keep, probably some masking tape back here that goes against the panel, and that's going to keep this flat so that when I put the flocks mix on the outside, it's going to keep that nice and snug. And then the other thing, as far as the top pieces, I'll probably just do something clever in here. You know, the tabs are going to come through. It's like tricky to do all this with one hand, but the tab's going to come through like that, so that once it's cured, my panel trim clip is going to slip onto it, and it'll be really, really good and snug. I've already checked the thickness of this aluminum is awesome for these. It works really well. So yeah, that's the next step, is basically getting all my little tabs to install into the panel correctly. And also I want to cut the other two holes down here so that I can make sure that it's all pretty much ready to go in once I, you know, am ready to put it back together. But I'm pretty happy with this. It's going to be really cool. It's going to be a good solid build, and you know, this is going to be about as close to a factory type of thing you could do. I mean, if anything, it's better, because they would have used plastic here. This would have been a plastic panel with just a plastic tab, which you could easily break off, which I'm going to have metal actually on the outside of the panel. So you literally have to rip a hole out of this panel to break this off, or if it gets worn out over the years, who knows. But you know, you'd have to take it off and put it on a million times to wear this out probably. So yeah, I'm really happy with this. I'm gonna get these panels where they're ready to put on and take off. Okay, one other thing I did forget to mention, or almost, is you want to do this step before you fine-tune the edge all the way around. And here's why. Because those clips are gonna, once it's all said and done, they're all fiberglassed in, those clips are gonna pop in a certain place. And this may not be just right. If you were to do the whole gap and really get it fine-tuned, it might end up where it sets a little off. So what I'd rather do is get the clips where it's gonna all pop into place, and then fine-tune the gap. That way I know that it already pops into place where the new gap is centered. So that's just another little thing. It's probably not super critical, because these clips will be adjustable left to right somewhat, but it's just one of those things that if you kind of get ahead of it, it will hopefully cause you less of a problem later. So here we go. So here we are on the driver's side of the dash again. I've made my little lines, and since I know the AC vent's going somewhere around here, I put this clip a little further in. And even though I'm sure I could fit it, well, I could fit it closer, it's just that I'm not exactly sure yet. Until I get my vents, I'm not exactly sure what might have to go on in here to get all this to fit. So instead, the clip is going to end up somewhere around here. So it's got a little bit more room for me to play, but at least it's still going to hold it good. So that's where I'm at with this one. I'm going to go ahead and drill those two guide holes, get the slots cut, and then start installing the tabs. And then I'm going to do the actual resin and flux work to smooth these out really nice and get those clips bonded in permanently. Another thing that you need to make sure you do is, besides prepping this panel properly, you need to prep all your metal pieces. All right, so let's say, for instance, where this metal piece is going to be flat against the fiberglass, you want to have at least a little bit of resin. Like, don't just put the flux mix on and expect enough of it to seep under there. I take some liquid resin and put it here so that this is going to glue nice and solid. You know, that way, I mean, it might hit like, it might squeeze a little under the edges, but just in case, I really, really want these to have a good solid bond. And remember, anytime you're bonding steel to fiberglass or metal in general, you need to have it prepped as good as possible, because metal and resin can be a little temperamental if they're not really prepped good. The epoxy that I use is meant to, as far as I know, West System is meant to bond good to steel and aluminum, but you still want to do everything you can to really put some nice scratches in it. And like I said, put some of the liquid resin before you mix the flocked cotton in it. Put some of the liquid resin on here so that at least you bond these two pieces together and there's some bonding there instead of it being dry underneath the little tab.
Alright, here's where you can see me going through actually bonding those little metal tabs like I was talking about. and I'm gonna apply a really nice skim coat of flux resin so that we can put a little bit of thickness on these panels, and it gives me something to sand down because I'm gonna end up putting carbon fiber on them. So I really need these things to be straighter than the way the fiberglass cloth laid out. I mean, sometimes it can come out good, but I was dealing with like creases in the chop mat and whatnot, so you know, they're a little bit wavy, and the flux is just gonna give me a good solid material that I can block down or you know, sand it down with a DA and try to flatten out some of those ups and downs a little bit. Now, in case you guys are wanting to use this method to attach your panels, I wanted to share the part number of these little metal clips, so you should be able to find them at just about any auto parts store.
Okay, here's the next phase of the dash panels. Now, they were looking good. I liked the way they came out. The shape looked good and everything. What this is not body filler. This is a coat like I was talking about. I take the fiberglass resin, mix it with the cotton flocks, and it turns into a resin putty. You want to mix it to about a peanut butter or a thick peanut butter consistency. Now, some of these metal tabs are still kind of showing through, but it's hard to tell. There's a layer of flocks over it. And really, if I want this thing straight, I might have to block these or do like, you know, kind of a nice DA sanding with some 80 to shape that resin layer. And that's the reason I do that. It's because I'm really trying to straighten these out. Also, I wanted to lock those metal tabs down. And as you can see, I've got the little clips under the bottom that'll hold it on, okay? And they're hovering nicely just, you know, below the, let's see if we can zoom this. Yeah, see, they kind of hover nice, like just below the panel there. And all three of them are good like that. Oh, that focused, cool. Now back here, we've basically just got tabs sticking out, and that's what those trim clips are gonna attach to. I used tape to hold them in place. That way when I'm doing that resin work, they weren't gonna move. So yeah. Anyway, that's how they're coming out. And I'm actually thinking that if I wanna do the carbon fiber, I can put it over like after this layer, once I sand them nice and straight. As long as I don't sand, you know, too heavily where like the metal is sticking up, and I've sanded, you know, you don't sand around it because then you're going to cut that flux away. As long as I can keep it pretty level with these metal plates, then another layer of carbon fiber will go just fine over these. So again, I haven't 100% decided that that's what I'm going to do, but I think I'm going to try it because I do have some carbon fiber, and if these pieces come out good, maybe I'll do the center piece for the radio and all the, you know, the part that runs down the middle of the console right there. And it's actually that white piece that's in the car over there. So maybe I'll end up carbon fibering that thing too. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, it's coming out good. Lots of work this week. Man, I'm pretty happy with how these things came out. Okay, so this is still a little soft. I mean, not really. It's just not fully cured. You can push your fingernail into it, but otherwise it's good. So you can see I resined over my metal plates, and this just came out awesome. So now I've basically got these tabs where the clip is going to go right onto it, just like that. And you know, of course you push it on all the way so it's flush with it, but that's awesome. It's going to be better than the GM panels because my tabs are metal. GMs are plastic. Well, who knows? They may have done something different over the years. I don't even think they use these clips anymore. Maybe. But yeah, so that's where that's going. And then I really love the way the bottom ones came out. You can see how they're embedded under the, well, it's actually, I put them in through the top of the panel before I resined over them. But yeah, those things came out great, and they're just gonna hang. That's basically the bottom, so slip it on the bottom, 2 clips pop in, should be good to go. I'm really happy about the way these are coming out. I think if this surface, when I sand it, I'll be able to tell if it comes out really nice and smooth. I might throw a layer of carbon on there. I think that'll be cool. So here's the other one for the driver's side. And that one I just did 2 on the bottom because there wasn't really a lot of room. So those 2 should hold pretty good. And then the clips will go up here. And then I have room for the vent, which is going to be somewhere over on this area. So that's pretty amazing. I like the way these came out. I just kind of go back and clean up the little bit of slag from the resin. But you know, when you do this, you don't want to be sloppy with it because you can still see back here. I have my nice line where I cut and sanded. And then like here, you're just going to have to knock that excess putty off. But it should clean up pretty easily because there's still the line from what I cut nice. It'll just go against it. So cool.
So once that resin is all cured, now you can take some time sanding down. I think I ended up adding 1 more layer of flux before I actually put on carbon fiber because there were just some things I wasn't happy with and I wanted to keep building a little bit more thickness or fill in some of those low spots that really needed it. So I'm super happy with the way that these things came out. I mean, the fact that, you know, you can build cool stuff like this, it's really just, it keeps it fun. I mean, this is what it's all about right here. So you can see I got these panels to fit. I wanted to make sure that they would clip on nice throughout the process, and that way if I added another layer or did something weird, then I could know kind of where I messed up and how far I needed to backtrack. But yeah, it's pretty cool the way these things are working out, and I'd say, you know, let's get a little carbon fiber on them and just see how this works out. I don't currently have the really nice clear hardener that West System offers, and I think I'm gonna order some of it because the first couple layers of resin don't really need to be that way, but I'm gonna end up sanding it down again once I've got the carbon on there with the good coverage, and there will be a final layer of the really special clear hardener that I put on with that, you know, that final coat of resin once that day comes. So for now, you know, we're just gonna get it going and see how they come out.
Alright, these panels are coming out awesome. So this one is holding nice and snug now. I've got the clips installed. It's I'm really happy with that. You have to use the little plastic pry tool to get it out. So it's 2 clips up here, and then the like joggled sheet metal pieces hook in the bottom. So I'm going to try to pop the driver side panel in now, and it's got, you see, it's got the 2 little hooks at the bottom, and then 2 GM style trim clips. So hopefully this goes in. I'm going to try to do it with see the little holes. There's one right there and one right there. The trim clips go in there. So it should hook just like that, and then you can see the clips got to line up. So the bottoms are hooked now. So let's see, 1 clip, boom. All right, perfect. That's awesome. Okay, that one didn't pop, but I think it just needs a little adjusting. It's holding in though. Man, that's cool. All right, so there it is. There's the driver's side, obviously, and then passenger side looks pretty good too. Cool. Moving right along with the interior. You know, it's just like you put your mind to stuff and you take your time. It's just amazing what you can do.
Now, you're going to really have to use some creativity to get the carbon fiber to lay out correctly and get the excess to go around the edges and sit there tight while you put resin on. I used super glue actually. It took a good little while, but I went around with the panel flipped over and super glued the excess to the back just to where it would hold, you know, long enough for the resin to cure, and then I could grind off that super glue and that excess material on the back. But you can see I got the edge to wrap around pretty nice, and if you don't do that, you're going to have some bubbles and the carbon's just not going to want to lay right. So that is a bit tedious. Of course, the layers aren't going to look good until you build up some thickness with the resin. So the first layer, you probably want to put on the resin kind of thick And if you don't have the special clear hardener, it's probably going to get some bubbles and little things in it. You know, you can try to heat that out as much as possible. But this stuff just isn't going to be nice enough to have that super high gloss finish until you let some resin cure, scuff it, you know, Scotch-Brite it, and go back and put on a few layers. And I'm thinking I'm going to finish this carbon out with maybe a low gloss clear or flat clear, whatever you call it. I've seen where people, you know, they're looking at a Lamborghini or something on YouTube and they say, oh, it has like dry carbon. It looks like, I think that's what they're calling the dry carbon fibers with that matte look, and I think it looks kind of cool. So ultimately, I might not even use the special clear hardener. I might just get some of that matte finish, you know, low gloss clear and see how it looks. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. I've definitely covered a lot. Some of you have been listening to me talk for over an hour now. But if you stick around, tune in for the next one. I've already got it about halfway done. I'm going to cover more on the AC controls, getting the air ride gauge and the switches installed, as well as that little clock piece that you have to have from the Infinity original interior, and that's what all keeps your air conditioning able to work. So lots of good stuff coming up. Even the paint job will continue soon. You know, I really just wanted to knock out some of this interior stuff before I put the doors back on and whatnot. So it's great to see it coming together. Thanks again to everybody who has continuously supported this channel. Now it's monetized, so all we can do is grow from here. And I really hope that most of all you guys are learning something from it. Also, if you're building a Vaydor, never hesitate to ask questions. I like to share the knowledge when I can, and I always get back to those comments as soon as possible. Alright, you guys, have safe, happy building as always. Peace out. We'll see you soon.